So what did we do today? Not much. Aileron, that second aileron, cut out the 1/4-inch plywood, got that affixed, the geodetics on the bottom, cut out the little 1/8 plywood for the aileron tips, I guess you call them. This is where it matches up with the leading edge. I've got a scarf joint drying under there, and that's where it'll meet up, so I've doubled up that one. This one is the one where the pivot is in. So it calls for 2, then it's about 1 1/8 space. You notice I've got all kinds of tape on there so the glue doesn't stick, and then another one. So that's where the pivot goes in here, and you slide that onto the wing there. Got that one and that one, and the outside piece of plywood on there. This is what it looks like on the wing or the aileron that's completed. You put that on, that's where the double one is. This is where the single one is, and there's that space for the pivot there. What I'm going to do a couple things. On the instructions, they call for this leading edge 1/32 ply to actually come over and hide the nut in there. And I've got it right flush. I don't want it coming over. It's going to get wrapped with fabric, and that's going to crush that anyway. So I've got it right level with that. I've got it hanging over quite a bit on the back here, and I've got it level, you can see here, with the bottom false spar. This is right level there. I think on the second one that I'm doing, you can pull this back, you can pull this down a little bit, because you've got lots of space up here. I've got probably 1 inch, 1.5 inches there, so this can go back, and it can just get lots of room on the other side as well. Something to keep in mind for the second one. That's about it. I varnished the inside of this little area the other day, sanded the varnish off of that covering plate. I've got the covering plate put on there, and that's drying up. So it's getting there. I'll be able to get that second wing together, and the first one as well, with all the hardware and stuff, and we'll get it thrown up onto the wall. One other thing. Let me pause you. This is an example, is that focused on there, of the aileron torque tube rod. So inside the fuselage, there's going to be an arm on here. This moves, then it moves an arm at the other end that moves your aileron. I know that some of the other Fisher flying product planes use cables. The Dakota Hawk uses the aileron torque tube. So, the plans call for the torque tube to pivot on a piece of plastic, just like that. This plastic is mounted onto, that would just mount on there like that. It would go through the hole, and it would pivot on just on the plastic. So what I've done is I made the hole slightly bigger, and I've put in a roller bearing, and then with my 3D printer I printed up a number of these. So they'll go over top of the bearing, hold it in place, and one will go on the back side and hold it in place. like that. The hole here is over 1 inch. It goes halfway through the plastic, and then there's a larger hole, about 1 1/8, I can't remember exactly what it is, so that bearing fits right in there. And then that rod will now float on those roller bearings. There's 3 per rod per side. So altogether that's 6 of these that mount the torque tube in place. I didn't want it on that because even though there's not a lot of friction there, when you add that up times 6, there's going to be some friction. And then in the original, if you remember, we were just pivoting metal. The actual pivots on the aileron were just metal on metal, and this was mine. I pressed these bearings into there, so now we've got the aileron actually floats on roller bearings. The aileron torque tube is on roller bearings, so that's getting rid of as much friction as possible. And I just like that idea better than going with a friction setup. I asked about pivoting just metal on metal, and the replies were that it's just a replacement. You replace it after so many hours. Well, that to me sounds crazy, and the friction of metal on metal is friction. There's a lot of friction there, where this is going to be completely frictionless, as little friction as you're ever going to get with a nice sealed roller bearing. So with the roller bearings here and the roller bearings here, the aileron should move as easy as possible. While we're talking about the mounting thing here, I'm going to look at that, and I've got it set up how it originally is in the plans, where this just mounts right to the rear spar. It'll be mounted on the back side like that. I was wondering, and I'm going to look later on to see if you could just, instead of having the L bracket, if you could just mount a piece of ply and have that embedded right in the ply. I don't know, but for now it's done the old way, but instead of a friction joint there with a piece of plastic, I actually put a roller bearing in there that will take away that friction. Rambling on again, that's what we've got done today. I've got another one here to show you. I don't know if you can get it set up with a light on here so that you can actually see the right there. If you can see how it's created with a bigger diameter hole and then the smaller diameter hole halfway through to support that bearing inside the mount there. So just like that. All right.